The mortal realms are vast beyond the ken of the human mind. They are near infinite in scope, their edges defined only by their lethality. Not even the gods themselves can claim to know every aspect of their grandeur. Yet, they remain united by the laws of reality. Aqshy, the realm of fire. Aqshy is a realm of fierce passions and boiling emotions. Its heartlands typified by arid and heat-scarred wastes. This was once a realm exemplified by a burning lust for life, for innovation, and harsh, simple joys. Since the coming of chaos, it has become a place of wrath and warfare, its every nation soaked in the blood of its once proud peoples. The lands of Aqshy, known to its elders as the Bright Realm, are formed of dozens of continents. The most populous of these is the Great Parch, the location of Hammerhall Aqshy, the largest and most prestigious of Sigmar's latter-day metropolises. There are dozens more nations across its spread, however, and each is replete with its own cultures and history. Though once they were all joined by the same seas and oceans of tepid, often acidic water, over time the energies of chaos have splintered many of its furthest reaches apart into islands, all but impossible to reach. No map details them all, yet still some commonality binds them. Aqshy's many land masses are places of searing hazards and volatile horizons. In this realm, aggression is born and carried far and wide on hot, gusting winds, and life is always lived to the full. No realm has a fiercer or more warlike outlook. No lands have cultures harsher or more littered with invective, especially since the dawn of the Red Century that marked the coming of chaos. As with most of the mortal realms, Aqshy is dotted with the ruins of ancient civilizations and marred by the dark, spiked architecture of those who tore down that which came before. Only recently have the bricks and mortar of new settlements been seen in the wilderness. Armed posses of trade pioneers and their bodyguards striking out to remake the links that once held civilization together across the leagues. Wherever Sigmar's new order thrives, magma generators, soot-stained chimneys, and kiln complexes can be found alongside the half-melted statues and scorched monuments that once marked places of power. Irrigation networks bring the healing liquid aqua guranus to coax crops from pumice drifts and cracked, hard-packed ground that was once watered only with blood. Even in the most well-established lands, the mark of war is writ large. There are still bones and piles of skulls dotted across the dusty wastes and volcano ranges, whilst the remnants of immolated corpses still send plumes of smoke into the breeze. There is a widespread philosophy among the tribal people of Aqshy that life is to be lived fast, hard, and violently. Coming-of-age rituals such as cliff diving and sulfur running will kill their aspirants as often as they harden them into better, braver warriors. Those that live long enough to grow old are seen by the young with pity or even scorn. The more mature souls realize that the elders in their midst are to be celebrated, for they have passed through the fires of conflict and have lived to be tempered by them. The survivors of these tribes have lately entered the new cities as reclaimed, and bring a ferocious warrior spirit to the armies on the front line, a spark that even chaos could not extinguish entirely. The years of hard-won victory since the Realm Gate Wars have seen the hopes and dreams of these peoples reignited, a bright flame in the darkness that may yet see Aqshy roar back to its former defiant glory. Aqshy is by no means freed from the chaos-worshipping tribes that once ruled over it. Despite Sigmar's gains during the Realm Gate Wars, every square mile must be wrested through martyr sacrifice and sanctified with the blood of the faithful if it is ever to bear useful fruit. Across the Great Parch, there are still vast swaths of land untouched by civilization. To undertake a journey from one city to another is to risk being hunted down, killed, and eaten. Reavers and cannibals haunt the wastes, as do fire djinns, chanting oruks, and processions of the unquiet dead. Small wonder, then, that the people of that land seek to live fiercely and to the full, for they know their time is to be short. The most part of the Great Parch is the hunting ground of the Gore Tide, that bloodhound horde under the rulership of Korgos Kul. Once a champion of the Parch, Lord Kul was led to a dark fate by Threk's Skullbrand, via the ritualistic gladiatorial conquests upon the Aqshy Clavis Isles. These once acted as an outlet for the aggression of the Parch's warlike tribes, but one fateful year they became festivals of butchery that saw 888 champions slain in a single contest. The carnage was so great that the veil between worlds thinned and split. Within hours, the archipelago was the gory playground of a wild-eyed demonic horde. Most of those who survived the onslaught slid easily into the trap of chaos worship. And so the Parch's downfall began. Though it took long and bloody generations, the bloodbound of Kul had conquered the southern half of the Parch. And despite having borne the brunt of Vandis Hammerhand's assaults, they claim much of it to this day. The western reaches of the Parch were once ruled over by the magocracy of the Alglaraxi Empire. Many of these great scholars debased their hard-won knowledge with forbidden practices, in doing so falling into the province of Tzeentch. Not for nothing is their old domain known as the Disintegrating Shores. That region now belongs to those same dark sorcerers, the chronomantic cults of the Time Stolen, and their avian beastmen allies. To the north, the ashen tundra of Katha was infected by the plague fleets of Nurgle after the Battle of Armada's Bane off the coasts of Batar. Much the same fate has befallen the far eastern isle known as the Talon of Ignax. The lands between Vostargimont and the Charwind coast are prowled by the Scavenge Kings and the Candescent Raiders. Their fierce rival, the Blood Queen, claims the coast of 1,000 Eyes to the east. Even in the Parch's heart, where the Dawnbringer Crusades reclaim the lands, these tribes and a dozen more raid with impunity. Aqshy is a realm soaked in the blood of the slain. In these violent lands, where aggression is carried amongst the whirling embers, it takes but a spark of passion to ignite a terrible, centuries-long war. Here is where the first foundations were laid for new empires, and for fresh wars of expansion and conquest. The lands of Aqshy are together known as the Bright Realm, and are formed of dozens of continents, separated by shimmering oceans. Once, many thriving civilizations could be found here, but during the Age of Chaos, they almost all met their end, pillaged and burned by Khorne's mortal worshippers and rampaging hordes of demons. The Blood God's invasion struck first at the Great Parch. Ragged, burned, and scarred by constant war, this great expanse of ash plains and volcanic valleys is home to several vital realm gates. The Parch once again became the hotspot of conflict when the Stormcast Eternals made landfall there, seizing the gates of Azir and defeating the Gore-Tide of Korgos Kul that had for so long made a bloody feast on the region. In the aftermath of that defeat, Sigmar sought to claim the Great Parch as a beachhead in his rapidly expanding wars against the Dark Gods. The God King's sphere of power expanded swiftly. Cities were founded and fortresses raised in Iridian, Petrolia, and the Flamescar Plateau, each linked by arcane pathways and guarded by formations of Free Guild soldiery out of Azir. In the wake of his armies were laid the foundations of civilization. Trade routes, frontier fortresses, and walled settlements to which those few ragged survivors of the Chaos Purges rallied. Hammerhall Aqsha, one half of the legendary twin-tailed city, was the first great settlement to be raised in these lands. But it was swiftly followed by others. Hallowheart on the southern tip of Golvaria, Anvilgard on the coast of the Searing Sea, and the mountain citadel of Tempest's Eye. Though separated by tremendous distances, these great cities were linked by realm gates, through which great armies could be dispatched and the arteries of commerce flow freely. Hallowheart trades Golvarian minerals and primordial realmstone for Hammerhallian weapons, while Anvilgard has grown wealthy indeed from hides and scales ripped from the monstrous denizens of the searing sea. Stirred to life by these resurgent markets, the trading empire of Batar has begun to dominate the western parch. Their capital, the floating market, is home to the most luxurious barter halls in the realms, draped with fire silk and ember spice, and home to 1,000 bustling merchants. Unbound by the same codes by which the free cities and their conclave abide, Batar is on the rise. Batar's chief rival is a fellow neutral power, the Aglyraxi Remnant, a magocracy hailing from the mountains of Asperia. This magic-fueled civilization is a mere flicker of the former Aglyraxi Empire, destroyed by the Blood God's followers during the Age of Chaos. Still, it has grown strong by scouring the parch for wondrous relics created in ages past by Aglyraxi mage lords, and by putting these arcane machines to use. Restored and empowered, the great Aglyraxian citadels vie with Batarian caravans for the parch's buried treasure. Like many of the lands in the Bright Realm, Capillaria was once home to a multitude of hot-blooded peoples who thrived on war and strife, answering any insult with bloodshed. It took the coming of the God King to transform those self-destructive emotions into traits that would serve his aims. The folk of Capillaria became colonists and city builders without compare, taming the wild lands of Aqshy with a belligerent, inexhaustible energy. Though it has been repeatedly subjected to disaster and tragedy, that intrepid flame has not been extinguished. Capillaria is known as the Twice-Blooded, as its lands have been drenched in gore twice over. Firstly, when its populace was devastated during the Age of Chaos. Then again when thousands of Chaos worshippers were put to the sword in the counter-crusades that followed in the wake of Sigmar's Tempest. Capillaria shares borders with Iridian and the Flamscar Plateau, two regions that have seen unceasing fighting ever since the beginning of the Age of Chaos. Its eastern flank is protected somewhat by the immense adamantine chain, though these sulphurous mountains have never been entirely cleared of their native Orc tribes. To the south of Capillaria can be found treacherous and blisteringly hot coastlines. While technically within the boundaries of the God King's resurgent empire, they are in truth lawless and untamed, and raided constantly by seafaring corn worshippers. Capillaria is one of the richest and most prestigious of Sigmar's provinces. The presence here of Hammerfall Aqshy, considered the center of the God King's empire outside Azir, ensures a steady supply of military reinforcements and luxuries from distant realms. Capillaria's bountiful realmstone deposits and other mineral resources draw colonists from Azir who assemble their own Sigmarite strongpoints on the borderland with the aid of bold Capillarian frontiersmen and women. for all this rapid expansion, only a fool would consider Capillaria tamed. Those reckless enough to stray into the wilds must be prepared to fight, for the twice-blooded lands will devour the meek and the weak-willed. Dawnbringer crusades of Aqshy, typified by those armies sent forth from the great city of Hammerhall Aqshy, are comprised around a solid core of Free Guild troops, the majority of them shield-bearers and swordsmen, with regiments of well-drilled handgunners to form a deadly base of fire. These armies are particularly effective when deployed on open ground, where the infantry can fix enemy warriors in place, while elite formations of cavalry strike without mercy into their flank. The dreaded Hammerhallian lancers, mounted upon their noble demigryph steeds, are amongst the finest cuirassiers in the realm. Perhaps the city's most underappreciated weapon, however, is its detachment of Dwarden combat engineers. It is said that dispossessed warriors and the specialists of the Ironweld arsenal can fortify a position from field to fortress, as the expression goes, before the enemy can even arrange for battle. Hammerhallian artillery, renowned for its reliability and ubiquity, begins to pummel the foe so ferociously that they must charge into the Sigmarite spears or face obliteration. Perhaps the greatest advantage that the Dawnbringer Crusades have over many of their foes is their self-sufficiency. The most renowned Azerite strategists long ago recognized the need for a campaigning army in the mortal realms to be able to support and supply itself in the most hostile lands imaginable. For their objective is not simply destruction, but consolidation. Each crusade is accompanied by foraging parties, builders, logisticians, and spell hunters, along with aetherborn sentry keeps and mechanical constructs such as cogforts and border walkers. For all intents and purposes, these are movable strongholds, capable of laying down roots deep in hostile lands from which to stage their campaigns. As befitting a city in which the Empire's military doctrine is codified and tested in theory and practice, the Crusade forces of Hammerhall Aqshy can be seen as the template upon which the majority of Sigmarite armies are constructed. So vast is the city's population that its armies form the greater bulk of the God King's mortal military, and it is a gleaming breast-plated gold jacket that most folk picture when they imagine the idea of a Free Guild soldier. Capillarians make up a great part of the Dawnbringer expeditions, for they seek any chance to make war against their enemies, most particularly those who worship the ruinous powers. Having experienced the very worst oppression and torment during the Age of Chaos, they would gladly die in a fierce blaze of glory to avenge those festering wounds. One half of the megalopolis known as the twin-tailed city, Hammerhall Aqshy, heaves with industry and commerce. Its winding, soot-stained streets are home to thousands upon thousands of mortals. and its mobile cogforts range ever further outwards to secure new borders. Even those Sigmarites who live in the far-flung corners of the mortal realms have heard of Hammerhal Aqshy, the great industrial heart of Sigmar's empire. Many may have heard it described as a wondrous city of fire, a monument to progress and a haven for all free folk. To some extent, it is all these things, but in truth, this grandeur is experienced by only a privileged few. Hammerhal Aqshy is enormous, certainly the largest free city to be found anywhere in the mortal realms. It can be found on the southwestern edge of Cabellaria, in a dry, cracked stretch of plains and foothills known as the Ashlands. One might think that this harsh and arid region would not serve well as the location for Sigmar's foremost and most populous city. Yet the city's greatest asset is its connection with a far more bountiful realm. From the center of Hammerhal Aqshy rises the shimmering Storm Rift Realm Gate, a great tear in reality through which can be glimpsed the verdant greenery of its sister city, Hammerhal Ghyran. Situated in the realm of life, this neighboring metropolis acts as the breadbasket and garden of Hammerhal Aqshy, providing priceless food and life-giving water to a land baked ash dry by unforgiving heat. This symbiotic relationship is the key to the twin-tailed city's startling pace of expansion. Dwarden-carved aqueducts carrying gushing crystal-clear channels of pure aqua Gyranus into the realm of fire. Where these magical waters flow, life is sustained, and indeed thrives. Yet the further away from the storm rift these channels reach, the more diluted and contaminated the waters become. The storm rift was once a migratory stomping ground for dozens of bone splitters and Iron Jaws tribes, who worshipped the realm gate as Mork's Maw. A combined force of 30 Stormcast warrior chambers led an assault upon both sides of the realm gate, alongside thousands of mortal auxiliaries. The slaughter was great, for the greenskins were hulking creatures grown strong and fierce on the carnage of the Age of Chaos. Yet tribe by tribe they fell, hewn down by heavy war blades, or crushed under the scaly forelimbs of Dracoths. It was the hammers of Sigmar that spearheaded this victorious attack, and they who claimed guardianship of the great city that would rise on the Aqshian side of the portal. They erected a grand storm keep, the Perscaparium, to stand guard over the storm rift, a golden edifice of soaring towers and parapets bedecked with the glorious heraldry of the first forged storm host. With the storm keep established, the construction of Hammerhal Aqshy could begin. Its foundation would lay the template for every free city to come. First, the ground was sanctified and cleansed with holy blood. And then, Like the great spokes of a wheel, shining districts spread out from the storm rift, each built with exacting precision and ornate flair to accommodate the waves of Azurite settlers that would soon return to the mortal realms. The immense chasms that bisected the land were transformed into trade routes for airships, or else claimed by the dispossessed for mining and industry. Over the following centuries, the twin-tailed city, and Hammerhall Aqshy in particular, became a haven for the free peoples of Capillaria and beyond. Those few refugees and nomadic tribespeople that somehow survived the rampages of chaos worshippers found shelter behind high walls and the shields of liberators. The city's population grew beyond even the greatest estimates of the conclave's civic planners, as elves, humans, dwarden, and even strange alien Seraphon poured into Hammerfall Aqshy. The solution was relentless and aggressive expansion. Each season, the cogforts that guarded the city's edge rolled outwards upon great iron tracks, and dwarden mason crews raised new walls and fortifications to mark the new borders, and channeled life-giving water through ingenious networks of aqueducts. Necessity trumped beauty now, and shining citadels and Azurite manor houses gave way to tumble-down shacks and heaving slums. Thus did the city of Hammerhall Aqshy come to be. Ghyran, the realm of life. The boundless fecundity of Ghyran is its defining characteristic. There, the endless turning of the seasons shapes the realm more than any other. Yet, the Jade Kingdoms have been cursed one and all. Most of them turned from verdant paradises to stinking hellscapes by Nurgle. During the Age of Myth, the Jade Kingdoms were lush and glorious. The natural wonders of the lands seemed endless. Fresh and scintillating water ran in gushing streams and poured in great generous waterfalls from floating megaliths crowned with lush flora. A ride of color on a swath of green, the landscape was a joy to behold. Even the insects that teemed in every jungle and copse were jewel-like and beautiful. The richly scented air seemed to pulse and throb with glorious life force, and the many seasons of the realm, not only spring, summer, autumn, and winter, but also the burgeoning, the reaping, secret remorse, the great lack, and up to a dozen more, saw the cycle of existence manifest in all its splendor. Then came Nurgle. The endless carousel of life drew the eye of the father of plagues, and he sent the greater portion of his forces to spread their foul taint across the lands. In every one of the Jade Kingdoms, the streams were turned to stinking sludge, the waterfalls to thick, infected phlegm, and the foliage to poison-laced tendrils that grasped and throttled those who came too close. The crystal lakes in which nymphs and spites had once splashed and frolicked became mangrove swamps hunted by bloated demonic toads. Above all other resources, the healing waters Aqua Gyranus was closely guarded by the Sylvaneth, the forest spirits using their artifice to hide their sacred places away from hostile eyes. But with every passing year, more of these sites were uncovered and befouled. Alarielle fought the Chaos Incursion with everything she had, leading the Sylvaneth in a war that lasted centuries. Yet against a foe that brought damnation on every level, from the microbial to the gargantuan, she found herself fighting a losing battle. The Sylvaneth resorted to guerrilla tactics, then retreated into seclusion, abandoning all but the heartlands of the Everspring Swath. Only the breaking of Sigmar's Tempest turned the cycle. The winter of Alarielle's discontent became the rising sap of a vital and stormy spring, and the Everqueen took a war form more potent than any other. The resultant War of Life saw the Genesis Gate, the archway through which Archaon had been funneling his troops to capitalize on Nurgle's invasion, reclaimed, and the Sylvaneth war groves resurgent. Still, the recovery has only just begun. The green shoots of civilization at constant risk of being choked once more by the creeping corruption that perverts so much of the Ghyranite wilderness. Other threats have arisen to tear at the thin tissue of order that Alarielle and Sigmar have worked so hard to pull together. From ancient, moss-draped cairns march the undead, and the swamp mists part to reveal thousands of Oruks intent on cutting out great tracts of Ghyran's bounty for their own foul empires. Yet while the seeds of hope stand, whilst Hammerhall Ghira spreads its newfound influence across the lands, and whilst the Sylvaneth fight tooth and claw in defiance of their way of life, there remains a chance for Ghyran to heal from its many wounds. Ghyran was one of the first mortal realms where colonization began in the wake of Sigmar's Tempest, for its verdant wilds are rich with all that mortal kind requires to thrive. On the continent of the Everspring Swath, the roots of civilization have dug deep into the loam, giving rise to powerful cities of order. Twin islands form the core of the Everspring Swath, one of the largest and most important of the Jade Kingdoms. Their names are Verdia and Theria. The former is a land in which all living creatures are female, the latter one in which they are all male. And when the birthing season dawns, there is a mass migration across the statement-like promontories known as the Trisk Isles. Flora and fauna come together in their multitudes in order to produce new life, and so too do the very landmasses drift together to reproduce, sowing the seeds of new islets and domains. Splitting from their progenitors, these smaller landmasses drift around the edges of Verdia and Theria like hungry cubs seeking sustenance from their parents' continents. The strange, beautiful lands of the swath have borne witness to some of the most momentous events in the history of Ghyran. Alarielle, the Ever-Queen, once made her home in Verdia before the plague god launched his great invasion of the realm of life, tainting the splendor of nature with his rotten feculence. Despite a heroic and fierce defense, Alarielle was unable to turn back the foulness inveigling its way into her domain. The Ever-Queen's strength faded, and as her lands withered around her, she entered a deep and lasting malaise. The years that followed saw the decline of the Everspring Swath and of the Sylvaneth. Alarielle's wild forest spirits. Their sacred groves were overrun, their soul pods crushed or contaminated beyond hope. The survivors fled deep into the wilds, a song of grief upon their lips. Those human and elves that had once called the realm of life their homeland were forced to flee to the realm of heavens, or else were hunted down and destroyed by rampaging demons. Rivers ran yellow with clotted pus, mountains crusted over with filth. Giant stretches of jungle were transformed into sweltering, gloomy places, where the soil writhed with fat-bodied maggots, and sour bile ran like sap from sickened trees. Demons, heathens, and scab-furred beastmen capered amongst the glades, exulting in the nightmare they had made of the Ever-Queen's gardens, once so beautiful and vibrant. Yet, in a land of ever-cycling seasons, nothing endures forever, and no tragedy is final. The hour of Alarielle's resurgence dawned once again, as she was woken from her pained torpor by the deafening thunder of the God King's tempests and the wars that it brought. Vengeful and fiercely beautiful in her war form, the Ever-Queen took up the great struggle against Nurgle anew, driving the Chaos intruders back on 100 fronts. The Swath was one of the first of the Jade Kingdoms upon which enclaves of order began to emerge from the darkness after so many centuries of horror. Having allied in common cause with Alarielle, Sigmar raised strongholds of his own places where humanity and other scattered races could find sanctuary against the predations of the dark gods. 3 great cities, the seeds of hope, were raised, each developing their own methods of fending off Ghyran's ever-encroaching wilds. In Theria, the living city found harmony by becoming one with the wilderness, while in Verdia, the city of Greywater fastness instead conquered it with ingenuity, at the same time earning the ire of the Ever-Queen and her children. The great nation of Verdia is a place surging with life, even by the standards of Ghyran. In some places, one can stand and watch the growth of new plants and creatures with the naked eye, watching a seed sprout into a vine and then to a towering tree in a matter of days. The northern stretches of Verdia were once dominated by rolling plains of golden grass, but the clogging of several great rivers by the plague god's demons has diverted the water flow, causing many areas to become marshy and waterlogged. Further south, the marshes recede and are replaced by thick forests, hills, and sweltering valleys. Here is where the majority of Sigmar settlements can be found, arranged in defensive positions with mountains at their back and uncorrupted rivulets bringing precious water straight to their halls. Each of these settlements is surrounded by a number of Sigmarite strongpoints on the furthest edge of its border. These act as staging and supply points for the Dawnbringer armies that are periodically dispatched to conquer and settle new lands, or to pacify those regions that pose a threat. The people of Verdia have a fierce love for their homeland and have developed many measures to protect themselves against its more hazardous elements. Newcomers and visitors find life in Verdia a harsh ordeal, and the clever ones ensure that they seek the advice of the natives, or green claws as they proudly call themselves, whenever possible. So easy is it to nurture new life in Verdia that the secret to surviving here is to learn how to slow the cycle of rebirth, to hold back the encroachment of nature, and harness it for one's own needs. Nowhere has this been achieved with such success as in Hammerhall Ghyran, one half of the twin-tailed city. Magma streams channeled through the giant Storm Rift realm gate keep back the endless growth of the Verdian forests, and have allowed the city and its terraced gardens to be transformed into one of the most foremost wonders of the mortal realms. With food in such overabundance and control over several bubbling springs of Aqua Gyranus, the pure life-giving water of Ghyran, Verdia has much to trade with its neighboring nations. Grain shipments are traded for iron oak from Theria, or masterwork sinew bows from Kernothiel, land of hunters. Erosian sap is used to fashion wondrous amber jewelry, and of course Hammerhall Aqshy has treasures from across the realms to barter. Since the very moment that the old alliance between Alariel, the Everqueen, and the God King Sigmar was restored, Verdia has been at the forefront of the War of Life. These evergreen lands are soaked with the lifeblood of both Sigmarites and Chaos worshippers, and the slaughter shows no sign of relenting. Colonized it might be, but Verdia is a nation that faces invasion on 100 fronts. From the stinking marshes of the Festermere far to the west, to the very gates of Hammerhall Ghyran, the foul hosts of Nurgle roam, spreading their taint into the soil of Alariel's heartland. Drawn forth from their jungle lairs by the promise of bloodshed come skittering hordes of spider-fang grots and stampeding beastmen. The ogres chew their way voraciously across the lands, delighting in the seemingly endless buffet that is the realm of life. Death, too, thrives here. The bogs are thick with dead walkers, and vine-wrapped geists prowl and screech in the darkness. Against these horrors stand the free cities of Sigmar and their Sylvaneth allies. outnumbered, surrounded, but filled with a fighting zeal that has thus far kept the monsters from their doorstep. Guided by a vast network of forest scouts, the Dawnbringer Crusades of Verdia strike from the trees, crippling threats before they can fully manifest, harassing enemy hordes and seizing vital ley lines and natural defenses. Verdia is not a land in which majestic armies, 1,000 strong, can meet in open battle on the field. Most of the place is tangled and overgrown, the ground beneath one's boots writhing with life. Forests mask the movement of scouts and archers and impede the charges of armored cavalry. Sucking marshes trap marching soldiers, dragging those too heavily encumbered down to a gruesome lingering death. Those who learn how to fight in such surroundings will obliterate any foes foolish enough to invade their territory. Hundreds of armies have met their doom beneath the impenetrable canopies of the Verdian forests. The verdant metropolis of Hammerhall Gira is a place of vast, swaying gardens and terraced neighborhoods, a city built to tame the dangerous wilds of Verdia. When war calls, it raises armies of hardy frontiersmen and elven hunters skilled in the art of the bow. Hammerhall Gira could not be more different in appearance to its sister settlement. There is no smoke-wreathed industrial monstrosity, but a many-tiered garden city of verdant greenery and sweet, clean air, dominated by immense terraces of arable land. Draped over a great domed mountain range known as the Coraton, Hammerhall Gira is hilly where Hammerhall Aqshy is flat, well-watered and bountiful where the bright city is so terribly arid. In the city's prime strata, the richly appointed governmental district that lies directly beneath the Stormrift Realm Gate, golden palaces stand perched upon narrow peaks. The ornamental gardens that stretch before them, garnished with vibrant flowers and glittering channels of water. Floating above all this wonder are islands of moss-covered stone, known as drift isles or aqualiths. These immense boulders are held aloft by their innate geomantic properties and secured in place by trailing ropes of hemp and silk steel. Even the city's green priests have not entirely solved the mystery of what keeps them aloft. Some contend that the drift isles are filled with gaseous deposits of rare and potent magic, but drilling into them is entirely forbidden after the disaster of Seeker's Earthfall, when an entire island came crashing down upon the city. To this day, some druids of the city claim that the Drift Isles are in fact living beings, and to slay them would enrage the realm itself. Fresh water pours down from the Drift Isles in gushing torrents, and it is this natural irrigation that powers much of the city's infrastructure and industry. Tugged into position by massive winch engines, the Drift Isles deluge feeds crops and fills reservoirs. turns millstones and power clocks and cargo lifts. The largest of the drift isles are home to entire districts of elven wanderers. The stateless nomad princes consider the Verdant city one of their few genuine havens in a hostile world. Unlike the fabled living city, an arboreal settlement in which nature and civilization live in perfect concert, Hammerhall Gira seeks to impose order and structure upon nature. Blazing orange furrow marks the variegated greens of the city. Rivers and channels of Aqshy lava, directed by Duardan-fashioned aqueducts that run from the highest strata to the lowest. These fires keep Ghyran's ever-growing plant life from swallowing up every structure and street. But they also serve another, more important purpose. Where they meet the springs of Aqshy that bubble up from below the Gorton Range. These lava flows send up great clouds of enchanted steam, a protective mist of pure, life-giving magic that repels demonic and corrupted creatures, and can even cure ailments and sickness in those who immerse themselves within it. This spiritual defense is bolstered by leveled walls and earth mounds ringed with lava channels and watchtowers, and defended by no fewer than 5 great free guilds. The printing presses of the free cities proclaim Hammerhall Gira the most heavenly place outside Azerheim. But for all its splendor, the Verdant city is no paradise. Certainly not for the thousands upon thousands of agricultural laborers who must toil in its fields and terrace farms all day in the sweltering heat, harassed by swarms of biting insects as they pick crops and utilize complex winch systems to haul drift isles into position. Such work is not glamorous and will never stir the heart of playwrights from Azir. But Verdians are pragmatic souls. They know that without the backbreaking labor of the city's farmers, Sigmar's wars in the Everspring Swath and far beyond would grind to a halt. Without food, armies cannot fight, and cities cannot endure. Mortals from foreign lands might condescendingly refer to the populace of Hammerhall Gira as green fingers or gardeners. But their sneers would swiftly turn to grimaces of agony if the shipments of grain and life-giving waters were to dry up. Insects are a constant irritant in Hammerhall Gira, and occasionally a lethal one. Grandfather Nurgle, ever seeking to despoil Sigmar's garden city, has in the past sent waves of bloated bogflies and fist-sized mosquitoes to sweep across the city, a vast, hungry cloud infested with disease and parasites. On such occasions, the populace flees indoors, securing themselves behind locked shutters and silk steel nets, while squads of streamers, Duardan and human exterminators clad from head to toe in heavy plate and armed with cannons that spew streams of superheated water, repel the swarms with well-aimed torrents. Not every insect carries the foul touch of the plague god upon its body, however. Not only do bugs and grubs provide the city's main source of food, but larger species of insects native to Verdia are harnessed as beasts of burden, or even war mounts. The famed shell riders of the 68th Veld Guard have employed rock crusher scarabs to great effect in their massed cavalry charges. Docile and pliant Androcus beetles are more common than cart horses in the city's farming strata, and have the added benefit of a powerful pair of glittering wings. Indeed, beetle flight is one of the few ways from which to reach the docks of the floating drift isles and the highest levels of the city.